Well, hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you. And thank you, Joe, the president of the Toronto Global Forum, for your welcome and for all of your attendance today. As the Minister of Education, I am delighted to be here this morning with you to take part in this event. This past week, our government has unveiled our plan for protecting our progress against the fight against COVID-19. When we also indicated how we will intend to navigate what comes next, and that includes charting a path forward in a competitive global economy. The theme of this year's event, The Future of Education in the Digital Economy, underscores just that. We know that education will play an important role in Ontario's recovery and our future prosperity. Core to our mission in our government is preparing the next generation of our students for success, whether that be in well-paid career trades, a future in entrepreneurship, or other STEM-oriented careers. In Ontario, we are seized with solving the public policy challenges of our generation. A stubbornly high youth unemployment rate, more than double that at the national average. We're seized on better aligning our mismatched labor market with our curriculum and our education system to connect people to jobs and jobs to people. And finally, we are determined to ensure our graduates enter into employment with STEM-oriented careers on the horizon. Our mission is to be Canada's experiential learning leader, and we have taken action decisively throughout the past years to do that. Our goal when it comes to the transformation we are undertaking within the Ministry of Education in the province of Ontario is to create digitally connected, emotionally intelligent, financially literate, and technologically savvy students who are ready to meet the challenges of today's and tomorrow's economy. Ontario remains a leader within public education, and we're focused on ensuring that students have those strong foundational understandings of the subjects that they're going to need to understand within the economy. Now more than ever, Ontario needs a strong STEM workforce to tackle the evolving challenges on the impacts of health, on the quality of life, and on prosperity. It's why we revised the Career Studies course, the grade 10 mandatory course taken by all students as a requirement for graduation, now focusing on the changing world of work, on AI, on STEM careers. It's also why we revised the business section of the computer sciences curriculum, building computational and critical thinking and entrepreneurial skills early in the education system. Ontario students learn about STEM-oriented careers and skills from kindergarten till grade 12 now. Through the study and application of science, of technology, of engineering and mathematics in real-world context, moving beyond theory and making this more applicable, dynamic, and relevant to the life of a child. I mean, my goodness, a generation of students my age, probably could have used knowledge of how to pay a mortgage, how to pay taxes, understanding the concepts of debt and credit, and how that intersects with our own household indebtedness as a nation. In June of 2020, we released an elementary math curriculum that integrates dedicated learning in both coding and financial literacy from grade 1 and up. In fact, now as a requirement, a prerequisite to graduate our system of education, every single student effective last September will learn every single year mandatory learning on financial literacy and coding. We became a leader in this respect in the country, long overdue, but necessary to give our kids a competitive advantage when they graduate. Learning coding and those skills starting now in grade 1 provides an opportunity for students to build problem-solving skills and fluency with technology and helps them prepare for the modern workforce. This has positioned Ontario as a leader in integrating coding into the mathematics curriculum as mandatory learning, right through grade 1 to 9. In fact, every child, as of this September, is now learning to code, and it joins one of 2 other provinces in the country that has that type of commitment. The new elementary math curriculum includes financial literacy learning related to money concepts in now grades 1, mandatory, all the way through grade 8. as well as financial management and consumer and civic awareness in grade 4 to 8 to build well-rounded, globally minded, civic-oriented leaders of our country. We also made coding mandatory, as noted. One of the first problems is to include the process of mathematical modeling within the curriculum itself. The new grade 9 de-streamed curriculum builds on that financial literacy learning now embedded within our elementary program. It includes new learning to support students in understanding concepts of interest, of savings, and budgeting. In our grade 10 careers course, we actually require students as a prerequisite to graduate that they have to develop a real-life budget for the year after graduation, trying to create that knowledge within the classroom and apply it within their lives. It means that when students approach day-to-day financial issues, like managing credit cards or one day buying a home, and we still have that aspiration for young people in this province, that they could afford a home in this province, they'll have the knowledge they need to make the right decisions for themselves. This new learning will help develop students with the transferable skills, such as critical thinking and collaboration, to meet the demands of our economy and the changing global economy around us. For entrepreneurial students, we want to open a business for those individuals that want skills to know how to invest. We've included that as a mandatory learning within our new grade 9 curriculum to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of the next generation, to give them the confidence and access to the capital to make those types of decisions. And with an emphasis on STEM, financial literacy, and those transferable skills we spoke about earlier, we are aligning our curriculum finally with the labor market to ensure students can succeed in their education and within their career. We will continue to build on this by modernizing the science and technology curriculum and other core subjects so that they can prepare students to realize success in the real world and attain well-paid, in-demand jobs. We believe in a world that inspires innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity, and in education that works for our people, for our economy, and for our future. And that is how we're going to build a more prosperous future for our students and for our province. When it comes to the schools that facilitate learning in the province, we also believe in ensuring that they are modern and they are safe. It's why the government has allocated roughly $14 billion over the next decade to modernize those very schools, ensure that they are safe, ensure that they reflect the expectations of students now into the future. Among those investments is a modernization focus and delivery of internet connectivity in every school. Yes, in 2021, in this country, there are still communities not connected to the internet, which creates a massive competitive disadvantage for our economy. We have people that want to get goods to market. We have young people that want to get ideas, into the broader ecosystem, and yet they are inhibited by the lack of access to broadband. Totally unacceptable in an economy of like Canada's. And that's why the government has undertaken a meaningful investment, now completed in every single school in this province that is now connected. In the most remote regions of Ontario and Canada, our schools are connected to the internet. They're connected to the world. And of course, the government, in a more broader application, has invested and dedicated over $3 billion to help us bridge that gap and the digital divide in the province for good by ensuring internet access in all communities in Ontario by 2024, a needed investment that will help all of us, students, innovators, entrepreneurs, small businesses, nonprofits, all of us alike, do the business of innovation and, more importantly, improving the quality of life of our people. And yes, we are investing in those schools with a greater introduction of technology within the classroom to make learning more dynamic and impactful, and that includes the use of robotics and 3D design, 3D printing, all of which can really help unleash the potential of young people within the economy. And yes, of course, we continue to focus on, during COVID-19, I'd be remiss to not mention, we're still focused on the safety of children. I mean, we've done good work in this province in keeping kids safe, keeping schools open, and this year we're proud of that with over $600 million of investment in air ventilation to make sure they remain safe. But as we look forward to a world beyond COVID, we're going to continue to invest in a technologically connected classroom for children in Ontario, giving this province a unique advantage within the Federation. And now, more than ever, we need to continue to develop a highly skilled and well-educated workforce that can adapt and thrive in the new global economy. And we're doing that by introducing more science and tech labs within our publicly funded schools, building them at the onset to incentivize young people to pursue this type of learning right within their communities, rural and urban, English and French, public and Catholic across our province. That includes the option as well when it comes to innovation to learning online. And I will say full stop, while I'm a strong proponent of in-class learning, call me old school, and I'm the youngest Minister of Education, somewhat ironic, but the truth is I do believe having that option for parents is a strength. I know many of our post-secondary institutions have embraced learning online many moons ago and with good cause. And in Ontario, to be fair, we actually contemplated creating this system, building up an infrastructure that fundamentally did not exist well before the pandemic, as many of you will recall, for those who live in the province of Ontario. We did so because we recognized the continuity of learning is consequential. Of course, I could not have conceived, 2.5 years ago, that a once-a-century global pandemic would hit us. But I do think having that infrastructure, having that investment, and having made that a priority earlier on enabled Ontario to more seamlessly pivot to keep your children engaged in learning, irrespective of the challenges we face as a society and as a people. And of course, in the context of the pandemic, it enabled us to have a high standard of online learning when children could not be in class. And of course, we continue to focus on getting them in class, keeping them in class. Over 93% of children are in class today. That is absolutely brilliant. But of course, for those minority of children that want the choice, they will retain the choice in a safe environment, well-regulated, well-funded, and structured for the benefit of quality pedagogy for children. But we do think connectivity is critical for students. It's critical for teachers. And that's why we invested roughly $40 million in additional funding over the next 2 years to improve that access to the remote learning experience. And through that program, we will have raised schools in Ontario to a standard that will put students in a strong position, regardless of which part of the province they live in, to learn, to continue learning irrespective of our challenge. And I think it would also complement the type of learning that can happen within the post-secondary system, including for many students, including myself, in first-year university, where some of your courses may be online or blended. This program aligns with the government's multi-year investments to support modernization of our schools. And in doing so, we're improving quality education for all students, allowing them to access digital resources that are required for their success, including, I reflect on the early moments of the pandemic, which now feels like an eternity ago for some of us, leveraging a public-private partnership with Rogers and Apple to be able to deliver tens of thousands of iPads to children who do not have access to connectivity, do not have access to a computer in the first place, and working with all sectors of the economy to solve some of the great challenges, social challenges of the day, was very promising when it came to ensuring that children, particularly from an equity perspective, have access to learning. There should not be a prerequisite to learning. Every single child in this province is guaranteed that commitment, and we owe it to them to look at and utilize every partnership to deliver that outcome. And we're proud to have done it with some partners. More recently, in the context of extending something tangential but related to the safety of persons, of people, was our commitments to extend free menstrual products to all students in publicly funded schools. Working with the goodwill of Shoppers Drug Mart to do that. And the point is, we can work together as a government with our communities to help solve these challenges, reduce the barriers, and increase the opportunities for every single child. And I would submit most especially for children who will face systemic barriers to their progress. I think of racialized children, children from the special education community, and kids who otherwise simply want to get ahead. They want to learn, they want to succeed, they want to contribute, but often there's an impediment to that success, and it isn't themselves. And so being part of a government is a recognition that we can be part of the solution. It's why we've undertaken that type of action over the past years. It's also why we're working with the partners within our agency, within my ministry of TVO and TFO, superb online learning partners who've been doing this for generations and who make a big difference when it comes to expanding access to learning for many young people in the province of Ontario. And we're really working with them to build that confidence in learning to work online for those that want it. And as part of that modernization, we're working and we're moving large-scale provincial student assessments to digital testing in order to ensure that students are ready for the jobs of the future, meaning, for EQAO, historically a testing model built on, a more conventional method of paper. And in a pandemic, when kids cannot be in school, that means we're not providing assessment. That seems inconceivable in a world that's so connected as ours. And yet here we are, unable to measure success. And so we've undertaken the digitization of EQAO, a massive overhaul of that agency, well needed to ensure we can assess children's performance in fundamental subjects from numeracy to reading for children in grade 3, 6, and 9, and in other applications. It represents a more modern, comprehensive approach to teaching that will prepare students for the digital economy. And I would submit part of the solution to improving the access of young people to those STEM-oriented jobs, those good-paying jobs we aspire as a society for young people, is also the recognition of how we can further strengthen the learning for our educators, individuals who work hard and who are, people within all of our communities that give back. But we believe for new educators in Ontario, they too have a role to play in setting a higher standard. And what I mean by that is, for the next generation of educators, we have imposed a requirement. You must have at least a grade 9 math standard in order to teach in the province of Ontario. Mathematics intersects in all of our lives. And I think we can, as individuals, and some of you as parents, have made clear we have to raise the bar when it comes to the application of mathematics within our pedagogy and within the classroom. And so, yes, we are asking and imposing or requiring greater standards on our children. We have a 4-year math strategy, $200 million investment that goes more back to basics, reverts to the foundations of learning. But we also ask the next generation of educators to have that competence and to intersect it from social studies to sciences, to geography, to history. There's ways by which mathematics could be awakened within the discourse within the classroom. And we think this is important. We think it's actually foundational that we make this requirement and we hold true to it. So we made that progress, and we've done so knowing that we want to position students for success, because we look at the data, and the data points are quite compelling. We have seen stagnation when it comes to math knowledge in Ontario for kids. This is not a political comment, it's an objective one based on EQAO assessments over successive governments, notably over our predecessors, where we just saw stagnation at best. In fact, colleagues, for many years we saw net declines in math performance when it comes to our youngest learners and those in grade 9. That is a problem, not just for them when it comes to enabling them to succeed, but as a country, as we look to the competitive landscape. How do we give our children, your kids, an advantage when they graduate? Well, understanding mathematics and ensuring that math is relevant to the life and job skills they will need is going to be job number one for any government. It has been for this government. And we know that there's more work to do in partnership with many of our colleagues here today. Because we are working to foster service-oriented young leaders. And we won't rest on our laurels as we aim to create a more civically engaged, entrepreneurial, leadership-developed citizen that is ready to take on any challenge, both at home and abroad. And we'll continue to adapt and improve our education system to ensure that all students have the skills that they need to succeed within our economy. And that means matching our curriculum to the needs of our economy. So as a final concluding thesis point today, it's that the mismatch of what we're teaching children and the necessary skills within the job market. The last time, if I could provide some problem definition, we updated the math curriculum in this province in grade 1 to 8 and in grade 9 was in 2005, which, really is an eternity ago when you think of the adaptations and the change within the global landscape and the economy. AI is not mentioned in the curriculum we just updated a year ago. We don't require financial literacy in all grades. We only introduce it later and in a very high-level manner. Coding is not existent within that curriculum. And perhaps most problematic is opportunities in STEM and skilled trades have a passing reference at best. If I recall correctly, YouTube had not been launched in 2005. The first iPhone had not been marketed in 2005. Folks, the world changed, fundamentally changed. And so should government when it comes to the curriculum your children learn every day. There needs to be more regular alignment with the skill sets of the economy with the knowledge we teach in the classroom. And it cannot be static. It cannot be because the minister of the day has an interest in giving young people that advantage. It should be systemic. It should be automatic. It should be embedded within the system of education to ensure that when your kids graduate, they're not just going through the pursuit of learning for the sake of it. They're actually learning skill sets they can apply within their life each and every day. And that's why we emphasize job and life skills, transferable skills that I think will set them up for success. We look to, when you compare and juxtapose Ontario, while we are doing great work, I mean, really, we should not, I should acknowledge the amazing work with respect to Ontario's education system, really a gold standard. I also look to markets in Germany that have a very different model of integrating work earlier in their education system, connecting young people, learning skills while at the same time applying that skills within a job and within a career. And I think that type of alignment is very interesting to Ontario, and I think it inspires innovation within our system of education. So we're going to continue to make that change, continue to align the curriculum with with the labor market, and continue to engage with job creators and individuals in the public and private sector to ensure that the skill sets we teach children really match the needs of our economy now and well into the future. So I appreciate so much the opportunity to be with you today, the opportunity to assure every one of you from all sectors of the economy and civil society that we are partners in ensuring that our education system is modern and relevant, and that the end goal is that you have governments and ministry and officials and public servants working to stand up for the interests of children and ultimately ensuring that they can go to class every day in a safe manner with a curriculum that is going to help set them up for success. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Minister. Your words will be most welcome to a number of people. I know Victoria Mancinelli is out there, and the skilled trade comments that you made and the support that you were providing are excellent. Also, on behalf of Gary Rabior, the president of the Canadian Foundation for Economic Education, I know the work that he's doing with your ministry is much appreciated, and allowing him to introduce programs into the school system to support the education process. So once again, thank you for your... Thank you. I sort of half introduced Gary. Gary has had not only an outstanding career, but an outstanding career in public service. For over 40 years, he's served as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Foundation for Economic Education. It's his passion. He lives, breathes it every day of the week. I know that because he happens to be my brother-in-law as well. Gary, over to you.
Joe. And thank you, Minister, for laying down the foundation for a great panel discussion. We've given this group here the modest task of looking into the future and taking a look at the world of education. I think the only greater chess in this world is getting 4 speakers into 20 minutes. We're going to take a shot at that because I think we have a hard stop at 10:50, they say, or I pay a price for that. So I do believe that the challenges of education are perhaps the most important that we face. You probably heard about the announcement of over $1 trillion spent in the United States on infrastructure, on bridges and roads and things like that. It may be there, but I didn't hear talk of education. And I really believe that at the top of that list should be education. At the top of the list in this country should be education. If we don't have the capability to provide the political and corporate leadership and civil leadership and community leadership and well-educated and well-prepared young people, we're in trouble. And I'm hoping that this panel here today will help share some insight into that and what we need to do to make sure that we achieve that goal. So I had some introductory remarks for them all, but given the time, I'm going to tell you that on the stage here we have Christopher Stoichev, who's with Huawei in Canada, Daphne Terrace, who's been in public service. She's a prolific author and award winner. Stephen Lund, who's a business leader out of Nova Scotia, and Lise Bellan, who's the VP of College Boreal in Toronto. Each of them are going to have a chance to share some opening remarks with you on their views on this topic, and then we'll see if we have any time for questions. We did pick an order, and Chris, I believe you're first up.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you everyone for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is a wonderful conference and a great topic. It is indeed a modest task to look into the future on this particular issue, and I very much look forward to hearing what my distinguished panel members have to say on this topic. I want to thank the Minister as well for his comments. I certainly applaud a lot of their initiatives when it comes to transferable skills, in particular, looking to where the economy is going to be going in a digital economy. That's absolutely essential and essential to our conversation today. Universities really do have to reinvent themselves as we look towards the future. I'll be interested to hear what some of my panel members have to say about that. The good news is that I think universities are doing that. And if I reflect on my last 10 years or so in a university, I can point to a few specific examples as a student. For instance, going through my undergrad, when I began it, going to the library, I was taking out a hard copy book. The digitization of the libraries over the last decade has been profound, to the point where I'm no longer able to take out a book in some cases, and everything is online, and I would argue much to my advantage and to the advantage of accessibility for students broadly. Another profound change has been cloud computing, and to give a plug to Google, although I don't work for them, Google Drive has fundamentally changed the way students work with each other. I can point to the benefits of collaboration and operating on a shared network where you can all get together, let's say 5 people on a team, and write a paper at the exact same time, seeing in real time what sort of changes are being made by your team members. That's a fundamental change that technology has offered us in just a very short amount of time. And I think that those are worthy issues to point out and developments to point out. I wanted to raise the issue of a digital divide that exists in Canada. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this topic. There is, and the Minister alluded to it, and I applaud their initiatives on increasing broadband access to the people of Ontario, especially in remote communities. The reality is in Canada that although about 94% of households in Canada have access to the internet, only 24% of Indigenous households have access to the internet in Canada. And I'm sure we would all agree that that's just not good enough. And it's going to be a major challenge in this country for Indigenous people to be able to participate equally in the economy unless that issue is addressed. And so that's something that I hope we might be able to engage on a little bit today, which is the issue of the digital divide and what is the role of the public sector, what is the role of the private sector, what is the role of universities if they want to be ensuring equality of opportunity for citizens in this country. How can they best do that, and how can they help the private sector play a role in ensuring everyone has equal access to networks, to the internet, to cell service, because it's extremely difficult, obviously, to get a job, to get an education, and that has been made all the more clear as a result of the pandemic, where virtual learning has increased tremendously. And there are many benefits that come from virtual learning, and there are many opportunities that universities can maximize the potential of students and can increase accessibility and opportunities for students through virtual learning. And that's another issue that I hope we can talk about. The Minister spoke a lot about STEM professions, and without a question, those are extremely valuable skills that universities need to continue to provide students with the skills for the future in those areas. But I would refer to a recent RBC report by John Stackhouse that talks a lot about, it's called Humans Wanted, and it's talking a lot about foundational human skills that we need in order to meet the demand of the digital economy. And what we mean by that, it's not just a plug for the social sciences or the humanities, although in part it is, but we do have to make sure that in the age of AI in which we're embarking upon, that we make sure that those foundational human skills are what a great strength of a university is, that it's educating people to think critically, to have high emotional intelligence, to be able to communicate. These are transferable skills, and we must ensure that we are providing students with those transferable skills to meet the demand of a fast-paced, fast-changing economy in which now more than ever we're seeing labor mobility to an extent that it is not unreasonable to assume someone in my generation will have 15 or more jobs. And we're seeing a significant amount of labor mobility as a result, and a significant change of the way the economy operates. So we have to have transferable skills, and we have to ensure that universities are providing those foundational human skills in the age of AI. I think that's extremely important. So I think I might leave my opening remarks at that. I think universities have a major challenge upon them, but I do think that they're at this point rising to that challenge, although with much work to be done. And I hope that they continue to collaborate with the private sector in order to ensure that they're meeting the skills that are necessary for the future of the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Daphne, over to you.
Okay, with no hesitation at all, I will delve into it. I'm the Dean of Canada's largest, or second largest, I really do think it's the largest business school in Canada, with about 13,000 students. And the pandemic, I want to tell you a little bit about the changes, the challenges posed by the pandemic, and how we anticipated some of them, how we grouped up on some of them, how we rose to the challenge, and what we've learned. So we responded with ingenuity, innovation, and the good grace of recognizing that the future was uncertain. I think that the pandemic mocked everybody who felt that they could look into a crystal ball. I want to look out at this audience and ask any of you, did anyone, even with all the data we had at our disposal, did anyone accurately predict that Toronto housing prices would go up? And if you did, please let me know, and I will send you Ted Rogers School of Management swag, because there was nobody in my school that predicted it. And so the ability to look at uncertainty, the ability to gather data but look at uncertainty, is something that we're really trying to ingrain in our students. But here's a bold prediction that I'm going to make. Everybody is worried about students right now. The students are going to be fine. The students are going to be fine because they're prepared to be more global now than ever. We've shaken them up. We've shaken the foundations of their learning. They now know how to learn online, to how to host meetings, how to break out into chat rooms, how to deal with different time zones, how to deal with international students. They have learned the skills that they need to go global. And so while we're all talking about this as like a terrible trauma to our students, in fact, it has not been a terrible trauma to our students. It's a terrible trauma to their parents. It is not a terrible trauma to them, because most of them are dating by meeting their dates online. Most of them are used to interacting this way, and they're not nearly as traumatized as we think they are. In fact, at the start of what we call the Great Pivot, which lives on, anybody who is the dean of any school in North America remembers Friday, March 13th, 2020, as a day that will live on in infamy. What we learned is that our students actually had better skills than we did. And so at the Ted Rogers School of Management, we hired undergraduate students in what we called SWAT teams, supporting wonderful online teaching. And our undergraduate students, who were very comfortable with doing things online, reached out and trained the professors. So there was not a single professor in our school that did not start in September with a great deal of training thanks to the skills of our students. Those skills can be easily found on YouTube. That is not the purpose of advanced education, to teach those skills. The purpose of advanced education is to take the skills that students already know and teach them wisdom. So we've had a really generational change. I want to tell you some really positive things. First of all, class attendance rose dramatically. So students did not do what we thought, which was to tune out. In fact, students tuned in. And the reason they could tune in was all they had to do was lie in bed, flip open their laptop, stay in their pajamas, and they were in class. And so they attended in much greater numbers. The students that normally would skip class were there. They were absorbing. They were not there happily, but they were there drinking their coffee, doing whatever students do in the morning or the evening, and they were with us. That was a lot better for them than commuting 2 hours a day to get to our school. Meetings with advisors were kept. We used to have a high dropout rate of students who didn't actually come to campus to meet with their advisors. Our advisors were working almost 24/7. They were doing an unbelievable job. There was no more casual failing to show up. So this pandemic has done tremendous things for people's ability to be there. So it's exactly the opposite of what we thought. The second thing is introverts. Introverts bloomed. So the first year of university often is a year in which students who don't have confidence, often female students who suffer disproportionately from the imposter syndrome, immigrants who are afraid to speak out, the first year classes often are dominated by a small group of guys that put their hands up, that sort of dominate class discussion. And what my professors are telling me is that a lot more students are more engaged through chat, and chat brings them in. Chat kind of reels them in. And then they're able to, I predict that when they come on campus in January, they will be more confident. So that's a kind of cool thing. If you have kids that are introverts, don't worry. The pandemic helped them. We also did things to retain our students. There's about an 80% retention rate that universities consider average. And before the pandemic, I said, that's a disgraceful number, 80%. What happened to the 20%? Why are we spending so much time and effort in Canada chasing international students, which is a really worthwhile endeavor, but not to make them cash cows? Bring them in because they globalize us. But what we did was we flipped the 80% number on its head. We intensely studied what happened to the 20%. A lot of them dropped out of advanced education altogether. They didn't go to colleges. They didn't go to other schools. They just quietly vanished. And so we turned on a switch to create retention. And during the pandemic, our retention rate of domestic students rose by 8%. So this is a worthwhile thing for engagement in the economy. And it gave us a real budget boost. We made about $2 million extra. But we also kept students, diverse students, poor students, different students. We kept them in the educational system, and that really matters. The other thing we did, and I'm a huge booster of, is co-ops. We grew in the last few years from 200 co-op students to 2,300 co-op students, which brought $68 million into the hands of students directly. While this is the best scholarship program ever invented, because it gives students money while they get work-relevant skills. And to better prepare them, and this is kind of the coolest part, we started a boot camp program, which is extra or co-curricular. And 55,000 of our students went through boot camps that taught them Excel, Tableau, Scrum, R, Power of B, salesmanship, all of that stuff. Completely unique model. Those boot camps are taught by undergraduate students. And we also taught members of the Ontario government. Hundreds of them came to learn Excel in our boot camps taught by our third and fourth year students. What a wonderful thing that is. We can invent a boot camp. It takes 2 months from the time we have an idea, a job-relevant skill that we hear our employers want. It takes 2 months for us to actually micro-credential a student on their LinkedIn. I mean, the speed of light.
I could listen to you all day, but unfortunately we are short for time. So
I'm going to stop there because I think we have such good things to give you. And last thought, everybody talks about STEM. It's going to be sales. It's going to be customer experience. It's going to be some of the old stuff, managing people, labor relations. Let's not forget those fields, because those fields, particularly sales, are going to be critical to economic recovery. So we're all talking about math. Let's talk about sales.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, speakers, please ignore the clock down here. We are not bound. We are not bound by 12:50. They've extended us to 12, so we don't have that much time, but we have more than we did have. So, Stephen, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Daphne. If it's any consolation, I could listen to you all day too. That's a great story, Arson. Everybody's great to see you. It's so nice to be able to see real people instead of sitting behind Zoom and not knowing what everybody's doing and if they're paying attention or dozing off or out getting a coffee. So thank you again, and thanks again to the International Forum of the Americas. I'm Stephen Lundy. Even though I did live in Halifax, I do live in Toronto today. I'm the CEO of Toronto Global. I'm also the new chair of the board of the Conference Board of Canada. So lots to do. I thought I'd just give you a flavor for what we do at Toronto Global and how our topic today really impacts what we do. We work with companies around the world to convince them to come and set up in the Toronto region. And over the last few months, you might have seen some of the announcements with companies like Twitter, Netflix, Reddit, Infosys, and HCL, two of the biggest IT companies in the world out of India. So we work with companies on a regular basis. And there are really three things that companies look for today when they want to set up an operation somewhere in the world. It's talent, talent, and talent. We're driven by talent, and the world is going to be driven by talent, and how we're prepared to deal with that over the next number of years. We're, just to give you a flavor, and I think you probably already know this, if you're not from Toronto, then I'll share some of these things, but Toronto is the fastest growing economy, fastest growing city in North America. We are the fastest growing IT center in North America. We've created more jobs in the last few years in technology than San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Washington. We are the most multicultural city in the world. We have more cranes in this city than any place in North America. So we went into a pandemic on a full steam ahead, bang, the pandemic hit. We're now coming out of the pandemic. And I think Toronto is going to be coming out and accelerating. And again, we have 2,000 tech startups in this city. So we're in the middle of this, they call it this fourth industrial revolution, maybe it's the fifth, where, things like quantum computing, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, machine learning, all these crazy buzzwords, are really important to drive the economy. And we really need to make sure that our educational system, keeps up to speed with what's going on. Gary mentioned the Biden, the trillion-dollar package, and really nothing in there for education. But what was in there was $65 billion toward having every household in the U.S. with high-speed internet. That's a massive, massive step. And we need to make sure that we catch up. So, the skill sets, and you mentioned that, Christopher, as well, we have to make sure that our universities are up to speed, co-ops are in place, lifelong learning. Our whole educational system has to make sure that we're preparing kids for the future. Technology is so important. Everything that we do in the future will have an element of technology, even things like healthcare and digital health. And so we have to make sure that we're able to adapt and prepare our kids for the future. But it is not just about technology, as you both alluded to. It's basic skill sets for the future. And I'm going to end on a story, which I read the other day, which really is telling. It was about this young kid who applied for a job with Amazon. And he was not a technologist. He never thought he would have an interview. And he got an interview, actually got several interviews. And at the end, he was asked to come in for a final interview. And when he showed up to work, he was met by Jeff Bezos, the CEO. Imagine this young kid not knowing that, first of all, and showing up for the interview. And Bezos asked him 2 questions. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Which is a standard interview question. And the second question was, how many window panes are there in the city of Seattle? Think about that question. He wasn't looking for 50 million, 2 million, 1,000. So this young person just sat back and went step by step and how he would figure out how many window panes there are in Seattle. And so he got the job and had an office beside Jeff Bezos. And so I guess the moral of the story was smarts and critical thinking will take you a long way. Technology is great, but the sales, the critical thinking, it's learning how to work in an environment, learning how to work in a team. Those are all so critical as skills. And for my job and working with companies around the world, we've got that today. We've got to do a heck of a job to make sure we keep that lead going forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Lise.
Well, thank you. My name is Lise Belland, and I am the Vice President for Collège Boréal. Before I talk about the disruptors in post-secondary education, I will speak regarding the 24 colleges that are governed by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, but I want to speak about myself first. I am a person that left home at 13 years of age. I am Francophone, did not speak English, lived in very, very rural. Closest town would have been 80 miles, way before kilometers. So I get the idea that today, currently, whether we talk about digital economy or not, we heard from the minister that digital fluency and accessibility remains a true issue, a very big issue today. Learning another language is also another big challenge, whether that be for newcomers or people that live in these rural communities. My college, Collège Boréal, of which I'm very proud to work for, is a community college with 28, that services 28 communities, has 38 campuses and access centers, many where they are rural. What happens in rural communities as well is you're not only learning digital fluency and learning another language, but there are many barriers to overcome in these communities as well. You may have older workers that don't have jobs. You may have people that are living in poverty. You may have people that have no access. You may have people with disabilities. The whole world of colleges today, if we talk about disruptors, the role of a college today is to be able still to connect to community. We do triages just like hospitals. So if someone comes to your door, you're keenly asking questions to really ascertain what the needs are. Are they jobs? That's why you offer employment services. Are there newcomer settlement services? You offer that as well. Are you there to connect with community or to do your piece in community work and advocacy? Are you there for training, which is very different than post-secondary? Are you there for achieving post-secondary education? Are you there to integrate into a socio-economic job that is not, like the minister said, a job, but a career where you're really having an impact in labor force and you can integrate in a socio and economic way? These are the roles of community colleges, to be there with its community and to answer these things and to elaborate with employers. I want to talk a little bit about the disruptors in post-secondary education as we speak to colleges, the changing in demography, the new delivery and provider options. We've been talking about experiential learning today. That is the proficiency of colleges. Colleges have been connected with employers from the beginning, servicing nursing, if you will, or IT, or community work. This is their role. What does the changing workplace look like? What are the new post-secondary education consumers? I believe adults in school today are also, and young, are also looking very much like it's entertainment. I want to be able to unbundle when I want it where I want it, how I want it, and whatever delivery I want it. If you're on a GO train in Toronto, you want that accessibility. So this whole idea of bundling it, like entertainment, is key for students. They be 18 or they be 51. What are the finding new ways to engage in business through micro-credentials, to industry credentials, to engagement of upskilling workers more effectively? We've talked a lot about youth, but it is very important to look at what happens today. How do we make these micro-credentials? And at the lightest speed, the digital economy will help us do that. What also about these career pathways? I wonder, in grade 1, you've got a plumber that comes into school, in a school, perhaps a policeman, perhaps a person that's trades. How can we bring that sort of career pathway in the school much earlier in the continuum world? I think that's very important too. And how do we create more public-private partnerships focusing on higher education attainment and workforce development for our community industries? I am extremely passionate and proud of working in this world. I have been one of the lucky ones that have traveled the world and gave 30 years in the private sector. I chose to come back in post-secondary education. I've been very fortunate to work with Ryerson University as well and to be the chair of the Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation and then be able to hire in the Future Skills Centre as well. Give to your community. Colleges are there to listen and to really engage its community, its partners, and its business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really feel it's unfortunate that we don't have more time to hear from these speakers up here today. I think with the little tidbits we have heard, we could have a very rich discussion about the challenges ahead. I take it we have about 3 minutes or so. We have the best questions you could have ever imagined here, but we aren't going to get to those. I am going to give each of you about 30 to 45 seconds to comment on what you might have heard since you've had a chance to speak, because I think you guys should have the last word if we do. So if there's something you'd like to share based on what you heard or to reinforce, Chris, we'll start with you.
Thanks very much. Well, I think, we've heard some agreement here throughout each of us on what we've said around the importance of skills that are transferable and foundational skills that one can be adaptive to the changing nature of the job market. And what do those transferable skills look like? We might disagree on some of the specifics, but it's clear to me that when we look at where an artificial intelligence-driven economy is going to go over the next decade or two, we really need to be thinking about how individuals and universities can focus on individuals and ensure that they have the transferable skills to meet the labor demand.
Thank you. Daphne?
I think I wanted to reinforce again not to lose sight of some of the older fields. One of the ones that I didn't really mention was family business. We spend a huge amount of time talking about entrepreneurship and innovation, but one of the engines of our economy, particularly kids coming out of colleges and coming out of immigrant workforces, you get a real boost by promoting family business. And I'm working very hard right now on trying to launch understanding of family business, because that really matches the hunger of Torontonians, the multinational workforce. And finally, the purpose, we were into big data way before anyone else. Ryerson was, a dozen years ago, was already getting big data analytics professors. But what we're trying to do is train students for whom data sing. So data these days, data analytics should be looked at as, Beethoven looked at an orchestra. It's not just what you can do, it's whether data sing recommendations to you. And if there's one thing we're trying to do in the university system, at least at Ryerson, is to create students that are inspired to hear the song of data. And it's a beautiful thing when it's not just a skill.
Thank you. Stephen?
Thank you. It would have been great to have some more time to talk about some of the issues, for example, around technology, the challenges, and I can just name 3, there are many, but the impacts of mental health and technology, and you might have noticed my Movember's Dash.
Yeah.
I have to tell you in case you don't see it. But also privacy issues, inequality issues. I mean, we could have a whole topic, a conversation around that. Having said that, we're coming out of a pandemic, last 20 months. We are coming out of it slowly. Canada has a chance to lead the world out of this. And Toronto, this Toronto region has a chance to lead the world coming out of this. And we're going to be led by our young, talented, highly educated workforce. And our universities and community colleges are going to play a critical role. So we have to all step up. We have to adapt to the changing times. We have to be optimistic, and we have to lead. So I'm optimistic, and I hope everybody else is, because we really have a chance to move the world here.
Thank you very much. Lee?
I'm all about reskilling revolution. I think that, there really is a reskilling revolution, and it requires some very heavy work to be done with employers of all sizes, particularly in Toronto, particularly small, medium enterprises. And I believe that colleges play a vital role in this reskilling revolution. And what it takes is an employer that has empathy. And I use that word because an employer that is empathetic will recognize that perhaps someone doesn't have it all together, perhaps not on the language front, perhaps not on the digital front, but there is workplace literacy to be had, be it upskilling, upgrading, be it soft skills, enabling skills, all of the skills we talked about. But I challenge an employer that is willing to work with government, that is willing to work with public sectors, universities and colleges, so that we could have this in-kind work and people can develop those skills together. It's a win-win. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I do believe the colleges have been most willing and able to adjust to change over time, and more responsive to change. I do believe we have to acknowledge that within the public education system, there's a much greater inertia and many other barriers to dealing with change. I do believe one of the biggest challenges we have overall is the gap that exists between the changing nature of work and the information our kids are getting to make education and training and career choices. It's a chasm right now with what they're getting. We work a lot with educators across the country, and one area of inertia where I think there is a desire but a lack of ability to change is if you've ever read a curriculum document, you see all these wonderful soft skills in the preamble that are then often forgotten as we get into the litany of target outcomes and knowledge. And what we need to do is flip the curriculum. We need to use the knowledge and capabilities to develop those skills rather than forget about those skills in the process of trying to deliver so much information in one ear and out the other ear of the kids sitting in our classrooms. So just some final thoughts.
Another hour, I'd say, well, why aren't we doing that now? If we had an hour, I'd say, why aren't we doing that?
I would be with you on that. We do have the pleasure of Winston Chan sharing some concluding remarks with us, I believe. Am I correct, Joe?
We say that the pandemic is the best chief technological officer for businesses. Indeed, we live right now in an accelerated digital economy. So what is the role of education in the digital economy? Well, the B20, which represents businesses in G20 countries, recommend preparing workforce skills for future industrial revolutions. We should foster a better partnership between the private sector and education sector to prepare workforce skills in the future by having more women, more youth, and more minorities in STEM fields. As well, the pandemic has created a lot of social inequalities, and there's huge unemployment of youth and women in many parts of the world. The B20 also recommend the teaching of entrepreneurial skills in universities, incubators, and accelerators, especially for women, youth, and minorities, so they can create their own jobs and build their own businesses. I think right now we live in a world that more than ever, education is needed to play a role in building a more inclusive economy. Thank you.